My name is Michael Turner, but I haven't really been alive in 3 years. My life has been a hollow cycle. Work, eat, sleep. Ever since the man I used to be was buried alongside my wife and son on a bitter January morning in Chicago. They were taken from me in an instant. A drunk driver with more whiskey than sense in his bloodstream slammed through a red light on Wabash Avenue, crushing our car as if it were paper. They said it was quick. They said my wife, Lauren, and my 5-year-old boy, Joshua, probably never felt a thing. I've replayed those words 1,000 times, and yet they never gave me comfort. If anything, they left me with a hollowness so vast that the city's noise became a distant hum, and my own heartbeat felt like it belonged to someone else. Now, my days were gray and interchangeable. I worked downtown as a financial analyst, shuffling numbers, producing reports no one cared about, attending meetings that felt like theater performances with no audience. The money was decent, but I felt like an actor in someone else's play. When 5 o'clock came, I walked the same route back to my apartment in Lincoln Park. Always alone, always numb. That night in November, the air cut like a knife. Chicago has a way of punishing you in the winter. Icy winds sweeping off Lake Michigan, gnawing at your bones. The city lights were brilliant, festive even, but they couldn't reach the hollowness inside me. My route, as always, wound through a small park tucked between two busy streets. It was a place of memories, both sacred and unbearable. I remembered bringing Joshua there on weekends, teaching him how to wobble along on his first bike without training wheels, watching him chase pigeons until he tumbled into the grass, laughing in that carefree way only children can. Lauren and I had shared picnics on those very benches. The park had once been a stage for our happiness. Now, it was a graveyard of ghosts. I usually hurried through, head down, avoiding the playground, avoiding the benches where couples and families sat. But that night, something unusual pulled me from my numb autopilot. On one of the old wooden benches near the pond sat a boy, alone. No parents, no coat, just a thin, ragged hoodie and jeans that looked one size too small. He couldn't have been more than 7. His little hands were jammed into his sleeves, his shoulders trembling with each shiver. At first, my instinct was to keep walking. Children were too sharp a pain for me to bear. They were a reminder of what I had lost and could never get back. But this boy didn't cry or call out. He just sat there, perfectly still, eyes fixed on the darkness. There was something about his silence, his strange patience, that rooted me to the spot. I didn't know it then, but that moment, on that cold November night, was the beginning of a story that would change both of our lives forever. I stood there a moment longer, breath whispering white in the air, trying to convince myself to keep moving. But the longer I watched, the colder he looked. His shoulders twitched with every gust that scraped across the pond. The wind cut under his thin hoodie as if it weren't there at all. "Hey, buddy," I said finally, stepping closer. My voice sounded rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. "It's pretty cold to be out here alone." He didn't startle. He turned his head slowly, as if he'd been expecting me. He had one of those serious little faces kids only get when life has demanded too much of them too soon. His eyes, dark and steady, met mine without flinching. He didn't answer, just hugged himself tighter. Up close, the situation was worse than I'd thought. His lips had the pale bluish tint that sets off alarms in any adult's mind. His hands were tucked inside his sleeves, but still shaking. I glanced around. The park path was empty. No joggers, no dog walkers, no frantic parents scanning the benches. The closest sound was traffic on Stockton Drive and the distant groan of a bus down Clark. "Where are your folks?" I asked, crouching so I wasn't towering over him. "Did you get separated from someone?" He studied me for a beat, then looked back toward the dark water. The silence made my chest feel tight. Without thinking, I shucked off my charcoal overcoat, the one I wore to play the part of a functional adult at the office, and draped it around him. It swallowed him whole. The shoulders drooped, the sleeves hung like curtains, and still he shivered, though a little less violently. "Let me zip this," I said softly, tugging the metal track up under his chin. The fabric trapped a pocket of warmth around him, and the smallest sigh escaped his lips, almost a sound of relief. He lifted his face to me then, close enough that I could see the dampness along his lower lashes, not quite tears. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and certain in a way that made the hairs on my arms rise. "My dad said someone would come for me." For a second, the world tilted on its axis, and the cold air felt solid in my lungs. My fingers froze around the zipper tab. There was the wind, and the faint slap of water against the concrete edge of the pond. And then there was that sentence pulsing in my ears like a second heartbeat. "I'm sorry, what?" I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "What did your dad say?" "He told me not to be scared," the boy said, as if he were repeating instructions he'd memorized. "He said when it was time, I should sit on our bench." He tapped the wooden slat beside him with a mittenless knuckle, claiming it. "He said a man who looked sad, like him, would find me here on our bench, and he would know what to do." A man with a sad face. A dark coat. Chicago in November is full of those. But something moved behind his words, like a current under the surface. I felt it tugging at me. "What's your name?" I managed. "Ethan," he said. He lifted the collar of my coat to his cheek for warmth. "Ethan Brooks." "I'm Michael," I said. "Michael Turner." "It's good to meet you, Ethan." I paused. "Where's your dad now?" He didn't hesitate. "He's in heaven," he said, not like a child seeking comfort, but like someone reporting the time. "He got really sick, and the doctors couldn't fix him. He told me to come here when I was scared, because this is our spot. He said you'd find me." The ache that had lived under my ribs for years shifted, sharp and present. I thought I had no more room left for other people's grief. I was wrong. "Is your mom nearby?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shook his head. "It's just me now." Then, almost apologetically, he added, "And you." The words landed with a weight that made me sway. I looked around the empty park again, half expecting reality to rearrange itself, to produce a frantic aunt, a neighbor, anyone. Nothing changed. The bench, the frozen pond, the boy wrapped in my coat. My life contracting to a pinpoint around this moment. "Okay," I said finally, deciding the way you decide to step onto ice. Not because you're sure it will hold, but because you can't stand on the shore forever. "Okay, Ethan, we're going to get you somewhere warm. We'll figure it out." I held out my hand. He slid his small, cold fingers into mine without hesitation. The simple trust of it almost undid me. We stood together, the coat bunching around his knees. As we started down the path, he didn't ask where we were going. He didn't look back. He just matched his steps to mine, our joined hands swinging slightly with each stride. "Do you like to draw?" he asked after a minute. So quietly, I almost missed it. "I used to," I said. "Not so much lately." "My dad liked to draw ducks," he said, glancing at the pond. "We came here on Saturdays. He said water is hard, but you just pretend it's a mirror." A breath that might have been a laugh caught in my throat. That's pretty good advice. We reached the park gate, and the city closed around us again. Headlights and horns, and the bitter sting of wind funneling between buildings. I aimed us toward the district station a few blocks away, not because I wanted to hand him off, but because I had no idea what else to do, and because the part of me that still believed in rules said it was the right first step. Ethan's hand tightened in mine. "You know what to do," he said, as if reminding me of the deal I hadn't agreed to but somehow already accepted. "I'll try," I said, and meant it more than I'd meant anything in years. The police station on Belmont Avenue was a squat brick building lit too harshly, too brightly. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed like angry insects above us as Ethan and I stepped inside. The sudden change from the quiet park to the sterile brightness felt like waking from a dream. A heavy-set desk sergeant with thinning hair looked up as we entered. He'd probably seen every variety of late-night trouble Chicago had to offer. Drunks, thieves, domestic fights. But a man in a wrinkled suit with a boy wrapped in an oversized coat? That made him pause. "Evening," he said, his tone tired but not unkind. "What's going on here?" I cleared my throat. "I found this boy alone in Lincoln Park. Said his name is Ethan Brooks. His father passed away recently." The sergeant's eyes softened at the sight of Ethan, who was half hidden behind my leg, clutching my sleeve like an anchor. He nodded and tapped at his computer. "Ethan Brooks, you said?" He typed for a long moment. The clicking of keys echoed in the otherwise silent room. Then his shoulders slumped, and his expression shifted, no longer bored, no longer professional, but something heavier. He leaned toward me, lowering his voice so Ethan couldn't hear. "Sir, the father, Daniel Brooks, didn't just die of an illness. He jumped from the Clark Street Bridge 3 nights ago. Left a note." The words cracked through me like a gunshot. My mind reeled, scrambling for footing. Ethan, standing so close I could feel his warmth through the coat, was staring at a poster on the wall, oblivious. The sergeant straightened and picked up the phone. "Yeah, it's me," he muttered into the receiver. "Get child services down here now. We've got the Brooks boy." I looked down at Ethan. He'd been waiting on a bench for a father who had already made his final exit, still clinging to the last promise he'd ever been given. "A man with a sad face will come for you." My throat tightened. Within 15 minutes, a woman walked in carrying a thin leather folder. She was in her 40s, dressed neatly, but with a kind of weary grace that spoke of long nights and heavier burdens. She knelt in front of Ethan, her voice gentle, practiced. "Hi there, Ethan. My name's Mrs. Carter. I'm here to help you, okay?" He looked at her cautiously, but her calm presence settled him. She guided him toward a chair with quiet patience, then turned to me. "The sergeant said you found him. Can you tell me everything that happened?" So I did. I described the walk through the park, the boy alone on the bench, how I gave him my coat. My voice caught when I repeated his words. "My dad told me you would come." Mrs. Carter froze. Her pen stopped scratching across her notepad. "He said that?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "He said his father told him a man with a sad face and a dark coat would know what to do." For the first time, the professional mask slipped from her features. She opened the folder she'd been carrying and pulled out a photocopy of a handwritten note. "This was the letter found after Mr. Brooks's death," she said quietly. "It was addressed to the stranger on the bench." She held it out to me. The paper trembled in her hand. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't just coincidence. This was a message, a desperate prayer from a man I'd never met, trusting that someone like me would exist. I took the photocopy from Mrs. Carter's hand. The edges were smudged, the handwriting jagged and uneven, as though written in the final hours of someone's breaking point. At the top, in shaky letters, were the words, "To the stranger on the bench." My throat constricted. I sank into one of the metal chairs, the paper trembling between my fingers. Then I began to read. "If you are reading this, it means two things. I am gone, and my prayer has been answered. It means you exist. I don't know your name. I don't know your story. All I know is that you must have a good and decent heart, because you are here with my son. I am about to do something that can never be forgiven. I cannot carry the weight anymore. The darkness has won. But my boy, Ethan, he is the light I'm leaving behind. He is 7 years old. He loves to draw ducks on the pond. He laughs when the wind flips his hair across his forehead. He is good. He deserves more than I could ever give him. I have no family left. His mother is gone. I cannot let him vanish into the system, lost in foster care. So I am gambling his future on the kindness of a stranger. I told him that after I left, a man would come. A man with a sad face, but a good heart. A man who would know what to do. That man is you. Please, stranger, take care of him. Keep him safe. He is all I had that was good and pure in this world. Please don't let him be forgotten." The words blurred as my vision filled with tears I hadn't shed in 3 years. My chest heaved, and I pressed the heel of my hand against my eyes, but it was useless. The dam had broken. I wasn't crying for myself anymore. Not for Lauren, not for Joshua, not for the quiet apartment waiting for me. I was crying for Daniel Brooks, a man I'd never met, who had loved his son so fiercely that his final act was an impossible leap of faith in humanity itself. When I lowered the letter, Ethan was across the room, sitting at the desk sergeant's side, looking at a comic book someone had handed him. He was safe for the moment, small legs swinging above the floor, oblivious to the fact that his father's last words were in my hands. Mrs. Carter's eyes were damp too. She cleared her throat, lowering her voice. "Mr. Turner, tonight Ethan will need to go to a temporary group home. It's the procedure until we can find a foster placement." Her words echoed the letter in my hand, and I felt a sharp jolt of defiance. Daniel's plea rang inside me louder than any rulebook. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "He's not going to a group home." Mrs. Carter blinked at me. "I'm sorry." I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavy there, like a vow. "He's coming with me." Mrs. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. I could tell she'd heard variations of my words before, well-meaning people swept up in emotion, offering promises they couldn't keep. She set her notepad on the counter and crossed her arms. "Mr. Turner," she said carefully, her tone soft but edged with authority, "I know you mean well. But you have no legal relationship to this child. There are protocols, background checks. Classes. Paperwork. You can't just take him home tonight. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Listen, I understand rules. I work in finance. My life is spreadsheets and procedures. But I also understand what it means to lose everything. My wife and son were killed 3 years ago. Since then, my apartment has been nothing but silence and grief. I know what that boy is feeling, and I know what his father asked of me. He's not spending a single night in a group home. Her expression flickered, professional pity giving way to something more human. Mr. Turner, I'll do whatever it takes, I pressed. Background checks, training, paperwork. I'll start tonight if you want. But he's not going into the system. That boy is staring into the same abyss that swallowed me 3 years ago, and I refuse to let him fall in alone. For a long moment, she just studied me. The sergeant looked up from his desk, but said nothing, sensing the weight of the moment. Ethan, still paging through the comic book, hummed softly under his breath. He trusted me already. Trusted me because his father had told him he could. Mrs. Carter rubbed her forehead. Do you realize what you're saying? This isn't just one night. Foster care, maybe even adoption. These things are lifelong commitments. You can't make this decision out of guilt or pity. I reached into my pocket and touched the folded letter. Its edges cut faintly against my skin. This isn't pity, I said, voice steady. This is purpose. For 3 years, I've been nothing but a ghost. That boy brought me back to life in one night. He needs me, and I need him. Her eyes glistened. She turned away, staring at the wall as though searching for guidance. Then, with a weary sigh, she pulled out her phone. There's an emergency judge I can call. It's highly irregular. But, she glanced at Ethan, then back at me. Something tells me this isn't one of those times where the rulebook has the final say. I felt my chest expand with a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That night, after a series of hushed calls and reluctant approvals, Ethan Brooks was placed in my temporary emergency custody. He walked out of the station still wrapped in my coat, his hand small but sure in mine. When we stepped into the frigid air again, he looked up at me with those solemn eyes. I told you, he said simply. Dad said you'd come. And for the first time in years, I believed that maybe, just maybe, life was giving me another chance. The first night, Ethan curled up on my couch, still swimming in my coat, while I scrambled to find extra blankets. My apartment wasn't prepared for a child. It had been 3 years since toys littered the floor or a smaller toothbrush sat beside mine in the bathroom. Everything was sterile, bookshelves lined with unread finance guides, spotless counters, furniture arranged neatly but lifeless. He looked around with a quiet, cautious curiosity, as if he'd stepped into a museum where touching was forbidden. I set a plate of macaroni and cheese, one of the only things I knew how to cook, on the coffee table. He ate in small, polite bites, thanking me each time I offered more. The manners were heartbreaking, like he'd already learned not to take up space. That night, I tucked him into my guest room, sheets that hadn't been disturbed in years. He clutched the blanket near his chin, eyes wide open in the dark. I hovered in the doorway, unsure of what to say. Finally, he whispered, "Can you leave the light on?" I nodded, flicking the switch for the lamp. "Of course, buddy. Sleep well." But I heard him crying softly an hour later. I sat on the couch outside his door, staring at the ceiling, every sob carving into me like a blade. I knew that sound. I'd made it myself more nights than I cared to count. The next few days were a quiet dance of strangers learning each other's rhythms. Mornings were awkward, me fumbling with scrambled eggs, him sitting at the kitchen table swinging his legs, watching carefully. I bought him clothes that actually fit, and he changed with a shy smile, thanking me like I'd given him gold. At night, he would draw at the dining table while I half-heartedly pretended to work on spreadsheets. Little ducks, stick figure people, the pond in Lincoln Park. He always slid one sketch across the table toward me, like an offering. I pinned each one to the refrigerator door until the dull white surface turned into a gallery of his world. There were setbacks too. Once, I heard him crying out for his father in his sleep. Another time, he asked when his dad was coming back, his voice hopeful but trembling. Each time, I had to swallow my own grief to keep my voice steady. But something was changing. Slowly, the apartment began to breathe again. There was the smell of burnt cookies from our clumsy baking attempts. The sound of cartoons playing on the television. Laughter, tentative at first, then freer, echoed through rooms that had been tombs. One Saturday, I took him back to the park. The same bench where I'd found him felt less like a graveyard and more like a beginning. I brought a baseball and showed him how to throw. His first pitches were wild, but he laughed every time the ball slipped from his fingers. That laugh, the kind that came straight from his belly, hit me harder than any sermon, any therapist, any attempt at healing had ever done. Piece by piece, Ethan was stitching life back into me. And maybe, in my clumsy, uncertain way, I was doing the same for him. The weeks turned into months, and what began as a fragile arrangement grew into something neither of us could ignore. Ethan settled into routines, school in the mornings, homework at the kitchen table, evenings spent sketching while I cooked. His drawings became more detailed. Ducks gave way to entire park scenes, superheroes with oversized shields, even a surprisingly good sketch of me hunched over my laptop. At first, he called me Mr. Turner, then just Michael. But one night, sometime around February, as he slid a crayon drawing onto the table, he said it casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Here, Dad." I drew us at the park. The word hit me like a physical force. I froze, the fork halfway to my mouth. My heart stumbled, then surged. He didn't notice my silence. He was too busy coloring in the kite we'd flown the weekend before. I excused myself to the kitchen, gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. For years, the word Dad had been a knife. That night, it was a bomb. Meanwhile, the legal process ground on. Mrs. Carter guided me through mountains of paperwork, background checks, parenting classes, home visits. Each step was grueling, yet I welcomed it. Every signature felt like driving a stake into the ground, declaring that Ethan wasn't going to slip through my fingers into some faceless system. We faced questions from caseworkers and judges. Why this child? Why now? They worried about my grief, about whether I was using Ethan as a substitute for the family I'd lost. They weren't wrong to ask, but each time, I answered with honesty. I can't replace my wife or my son, I told them. And I don't want to. Ethan isn't filling a hole. He's building something new with me. We're both survivors. We understand each other in a way that can't be measured on paper. Some officials nodded skeptically. Others, quietly, seemed moved. There were moments that tested me. Like the night Ethan had a nightmare so fierce he bolted from his bed, sobbing and gasping for air. I held him against my chest until his shaking eased, whispering that he was safe, that I wasn't going anywhere. He clung to me with a desperation that left me awake long after he'd fallen asleep, wondering if I could ever be enough for him. But there were victories too. A teacher's note praising his improvement in class. His laughter when we baked a pizza and the crust burned black. His shy grin when I cheered for him at his first Little League practice. Every day, our lives intertwined a little more tightly. My apartment wasn't quiet anymore. My grief wasn't the only voice echoing off the walls. And a year later, in a judge's wood-paneled chambers, it became official. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, peered over her glasses at me. "Mr. Turner, are you certain you are ready for this responsibility? Adoption is permanent. It is for life." I looked down at Ethan, dressed in the small navy suit we'd picked out together. His hand slipped into mine, steady and warm. His eyes searched mine with trust that made me stand straighter than I had in years. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not just ready. I've been waiting for this without even knowing it. He is my son." The gavel struck wood, and just like that, Ethan Brooks became Ethan Turner. But more than that, Michael Turner, the man who had been living like a ghost, became a father again. Spring in Chicago had a way of erasing the bite of winter. The air was soft, the trees bursting with fresh green, and the pond in Lincoln Park shimmered in the late afternoon sun. Ethan and I sat side by side on the same weathered bench where everything had begun, but he wasn't a shivering boy wrapped in a stranger's coat. He was 8 now, tall enough that his feet touched the ground, his face alight with joy as he held the string of a kite tugging high above us. The tail danced bright red against the wide blue sky. "Look, Dad," he shouted, laughter bubbling out of him. "It's flying higher than the Willis Tower." I chuckled. "It'll always be the Sears Tower to me, buddy." His joy was infectious, filling the air where the ghosts of my past once stood. This park, once a graveyard of my memories, now echoed with his laughter. I thought of Daniel Brooks, a man I'd never met, whose final, desperate act was a leap of faith in a stranger. His prayer had found me in the darkness and, through his son, had led me back into the light. A sudden gust of wind pulled the string taut. "Dad, help!" Ethan yelled, laughing as he struggled. I moved behind him, my hands covering his, our fingers intertwined around the string. Together, we leaned back, a team against the wind, our laughter mixing and rising toward the bright blue sky. On a cold November night, two broken souls had met on this bench. Now, a father and son were flying a kite. It was proof that sometimes, the most powerful prayers are answered not with a thunderous miracle, but with a quiet hand reaching out in the dark. The world can feel lonely, but stories like Michael and Ethan's remind us of the light. If their journey touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope can be found in the most unexpected places. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments what this story meant to you. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one of our emotional, life-changing stories.